He didn't know he was driving them to the end. Not that morning, not on that route. For 22 years, Daniel had driven the same bus, on the same loop, with the same stops. 6:15 a.m. sharp at the old post office, 6:23 by the bakery, 6:37 at the corner of Jefferson and 9th, where the temp workers always waited, still half asleep, coffee in one hand, badge in the other. They worked at the plant on the edge of town, a massive, glass-paneled structure that shimmered in the early morning haze like it was immune to gravity or failure. Always hiring. Always promising. Daniel didn't ask what they did inside. It wasn't his job to know. He just drove. That morning, the fog was thicker than usual. He clicked on the defroster, sipped burnt diner coffee, and watched them climb aboard. First was Janelle. Single mom, 3 kids, always polite. Then Ricardo, earbuds in, nodding to a beat only he could hear. Then a man he didn't recognize, older, nervous eyes, clutching a manila envelope like it was life support. Daniel gave his usual nod. Morning. The man didn't respond. By the time they reached the final pickup, the bus was nearly full. Quiet, too quiet. He was used to banter, tired jokes, weekend plans, gripes about supervisors. But not today. Today, they stared ahead, blank, resigned, like soldiers riding toward a battle no one explained. Daniel kept his hands on the wheel, but something pressed in his chest. The radio crackled. Weather update. No rain. Traffic light turned green. He rolled forward. The plant loomed ahead, massive, clean, corporate pride in architectural form. But the parking lot was too empty. Daniel blinked. Where were the executives' cars? Where was the morning delivery van? Where was the security guard who always waved? He pulled into the usual drop-off zone. The front doors of the plant were closed, locked. No lights inside. No movement. He shifted into park, stood, and turned toward his passengers. Some didn't move. Some stood slowly. 1 or 2 looked at each other, waiting for someone to explain. Then the doors of the bus opened with a soft hiss. They stepped out, one by one, like people waking into a bad dream. Daniel stayed in the seat, watched. No alarms, no messages, no security. Just dozens of workers standing in front of a building that had erased itself overnight. One woman walked up to the glass, tried the handle. Nothing. She pressed her forehead to the window. Inside, empty desks, screens frozen, chairs askew like someone had left in a hurry. A man next to her muttered, "They're gone." Daniel stepped off the bus. "What's going on?" he asked. No one answered. They didn't have answers. They just had the same realization, one after another, the one that starts in your stomach and rises to your throat. You've been left behind. And someone knew it would happen. Just not you. Not yet. Daniel looked down at the manila envelope the older man still held. He was shaking. Daniel asked again, softer, "What's going on?" The man whispered, "They moved everything offshore. Last week, the rest of us, they didn't tell us." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked back at the bus. The warmth of the driver's seat now felt like a crime scene. Because that morning, he hadn't just driven them to work. He'd driven them to a lie. The next morning, Daniel showed up early. Earlier than usual. Too early for traffic. Too early for questions. He sat in the driver's seat, engine idling, door open, waiting for faces that might not return. But they did. Not all, but enough. Janelle climbed aboard first. No eye contact this time. Then Ricardo. No music, just silence. No one asked about yesterday. No one brought it up. Because what do you say when everything you depended on disappears overnight? The plant was still locked, still dark. But the ride continued, like routine was the only thing keeping them from falling apart. Daniel adjusted his rearview mirror, watched their faces, It was the silence he couldn't get used to. Not just quiet, calculated silence. Like every word not spoken was protecting a piece of someone's dignity. At Jefferson and 9th, he picked up the manila envelope guy again. This time, the envelope was gone, but his hands still trembled. Daniel broke the silence. "You okay?" The man nodded, then shook his head. "My pension's gone," he said quietly. "They said I cashed it." "I didn't." Daniel didn't know what to say. So he said the only honest thing he could. "I'm sorry." The man didn't respond. As they neared the plant, someone at the back of the bus whispered, "There's tape on the door." And there was. Caution tape. Across the front entrance, yellow, stark. No official statement, no security. Just tape, the kind that turns a place into a warning. They didn't get off. They just sat. Daniel turned off the engine, turned around, and that's when he noticed some of them were holding papers, documents, letters, severance forms, legal notices. One woman clutched a small cardboard box, a mug, a photo, a stapler. None of them had collected those things yesterday. They'd been let in, after everyone else had gone. They had been summoned, not to work, but to clean out what was left of their own lives. Daniel finally asked what none of them had. "Did they tell you?" Janelle answered, not looking up. "They told the execs first, gave them parachutes, moved the assets, then told us not to panic," Ricardo added. "My key card didn't work this morning, but they said I resigned." The man in the front laughed once, bitter. "They wrote the ending before we read the script." Daniel felt heat in his throat. He had driven them here again, to this same place, twice, because part of him didn't want to believe it. Because part of him hoped someone would still come out of the building and say it was all a mistake. But no one came. No one ever would. That afternoon, the tape was gone. So was the sign. And by evening, the company's website redirected to a blank page. Daniel sat alone in the parked bus. The seats behind him smelled like fear, like sweat and old coffee and quiet collapse. He didn't know it yet, but he was becoming part of their story, and no one was going to warn him either. Daniel showed up again on Friday, not because anyone told him to. There were no dispatch updates, no company memos, no emails, but routine has gravity, and breaking it felt worse than facing silence. At the first stop, no one waited. Second stop, empty. By the third, a single woman climbed aboard. Mid-40s, he remembered her vaguely. Always sat near the emergency exit, always reading receipts or pay stubs on the way in. Today, her hands were empty. She nodded once, didn't speak. By the time they neared the final pickup, only 5 passengers were on board. The rest had vanished, not formally, not with announcements or letters. They simply didn't show. Daniel parked near the plant entrance. There was no caution tape, no signs, just a stillness that felt permanent. The bus doors opened with their usual sigh, but no one moved. The woman at the emergency exit stood finally and said, "We're not going in." Daniel looked at her. "Why?" She shrugged. "There's nothing left to go into." No one argued. No one even looked at the building. Instead, one by one, they stepped off and stood in the cold, not facing the doors, but each other. Someone lit a cigarette. Another checked a phone with no signal. They weren't waiting for instructions. They were waiting for acceptance. Daniel left the engine running, walked out with them. Together, they stood at the edge of the property. And for the first time, Daniel realized they weren't confused. They were ashamed. Ashamed they didn't see it coming. Ashamed they still believed. Ashamed they'd brought lunch that day like it was any other. He looked at the building. How perfect it still looked. Not boarded up. Not wrecked. Just hollow. An illusion that hadn't gotten the memo. It was dead. The woman spoke again. "You know they sold it last week?" Daniel turned to her. Sold it to an LLC offshore. All digital now, no operations. Just paper profit. She held out her phone, showed him a screenshot, a real estate blog, a press release, some faceless exec in a suit shaking hands. Daniel stared at the headline. Legacy firm transitions into cloud-based holding. The future is frictionless. Frictionless. He looked at the people beside him. Their hands, their jackets, their bills, their unfinished lives. Frictionless. He didn't know if he wanted to laugh or scream. The woman flicked her cigarette into the dirt. No one warned us. No one had to. They knew we wouldn't matter. Daniel nodded, and in that moment, the weight of all the miles he had driven settled in his chest like steel. He hadn't just brought them to work. He had delivered them into disappearance. And now, he was the only one still driving the route. Daniel doesn't take that route anymore. He asked for reassignment, said it was too far, though the truth was closer. It was too empty. Sometimes he drives past the old plant anyway, just to see if anything's changed. It never has. Same glass walls, same silent parking lot, same ghost of a promise that once pulled 100 people out of bed every morning. He watches the road where Janelle used to stand, the bench where Ricardo always slouched, the curb where that man with the envelope once waited, still believing something good was coming. None of them ride anymore. Some moved away, some moved on. Some simply disappeared, the kind of disappearance no obituary catches. Daniel still drives people, still opens the doors, still keeps the same quiet nod, the same tired smile. But now, every time someone steps off his bus, he wonders, where are they really going? And what do they not know yet? Because he learned something that week. You can drive the same route every day and still not see the collapse until you're already parked inside it.